We'd like to welcome you this morning. I'm Kim Tully from Engaging Dementia, and we're very happy to have Joyce Fitzpatrick with us here today. The topic today is finding inner calm and resolution in a flower garden. So I will turn it over to you, Joyce.
Thank you very much, Kim. Good morning, everybody. I'm delighted to have you here in this webinar today. It's a wonderful, beautiful day in May. We're all alive and well. And, there's just so much excitement when we wake up these days. There's so much happening all around. The days are brighter, the birds are singing, the leaves are opening on the trees. It's an exciting time. And it's particularly exciting for us who are coming out of the pandemic. Over the last two webinars, we were looking at how the pandemic had really, altered our lives so drastically. There was a lot of isolation, particularly for older people, a lot of loneliness, and a lot of anxiety around. And now that is hopefully all over. Now we're into the wonderful days of summer, and all of the memories of summer and the activities of summer are back. And so this morning's webinar is about how we can use the garden, the flower garden, and everything around us for stillness and for inner calm. Also, it's all about finding resolution after this time of great turmoil. So a lot of research has been done in this area on the benefits of for mental health of being outdoors. There's been many, many studies done, particularly in Sweden and in Germany, but also in the United States of America and in England, indeed. A lot of work has been done on the benefits of the outdoor, anything, being in wilderness, being in forests, by rivers, on the seashore. There's so much evidence there that it brings up calm in a human being. We know the benefits of the outdoor very clearly. We've gone over them in the last two webinars. It lowers the heart rate, it lowers the stress hormones, the tension in muscles, and it causes relaxation, causes to be out in the outdoor, an increase in our serotonin levels and our dopamine, particularly today when we talk about the flower garden. I'll get to that in a few minutes. So the psychological benefits of being outdoors are so enormous and so well studied that we'd be crazy not to make a date with ourselves to be outdoor, a date every day. The recommended time in the garden to achieve the maximum benefits is about 2 hours a week or 20 minutes a day. But of course, if you are getting over maybe quite a stressful time, you might like to spend 2 hours a day out in the garden or out in the outdoors, surrounded by trees, looking at grass, looking at flowers, looking at things blowing in the wind. So my name is Joyce Fitzpatrick, and I have been working in this area for a long time, really a long time. My mother had Alzheimer's for 17 years, and during that time I was her main carer, although I was working as well. And the outdoors was a great balm for her. Every evening we went walking down by the Dodder there in Rathfarnham with her little dog, and we spent maybe 2 or 3 hours out some evenings, walking and looking at things and throwing stones into the river and, just having so much fun. There were squirrels and birds and the track of foxes and lots of things to look at. There was a lot of flowers, wildflowers growing by the side of the river. And my mother thoroughly enjoyed it. And this was really interesting to me because my mother was really not a person who was, that crazy about gardening down through the years. In fact, she used to give out to me for the amount of time I would spend in the garden and said it was a waste of time. You could buy all that in the supermarket. But as she got older and through her dementia, the garden was a real gift, a real treat for her. Later on, when I've studied many things about dementia and about activities, I realized that even bird sound, which I can hear right now coming in the window, bird song is just such a wonderful sound for us to hear first thing in the morning. Particularly people who maybe have memory problems. The bird song reminds us that it's early in the day and it's time to get up and out. Some people have great difficulty hearing bird song, and that's why you can use YouTube and play it at different times in the day for people. It's really, really terrific. So over the years, I have discovered in my work how the garden has been a wonderful, wonderful venue for people to gather, both for staff and family, as well as residents, older people with and without, living with and without dementia. It has been a great source of stillness, a great, I suppose, rehabilitating element to their life. And you might wonder why that is, but of course, that's been very studied. So we can look at that now. A garden is a special place that is created by us humans to bring paradise close to us. That's really what it is. If we go around the world, we look at different examples of gardens. The Japanese have their cherry blossom gardens. And of course, in the Muslim cities in Europe, you get wonderful water gardens. There are terrific dry Mediterranean gardens right through Italy and around the Mediterranean. And of course, if you go to the polar ice cap, even, you find places that people have, around them, have built around them, where they enjoy spring flowers or whatever happens to be there, if there are conifers or whatever in the wintertime. So man has always created a special place to call his own or her own, something that surrounds and brings protection. So in our gardens, we should look at that element and say, is there something in this garden that brings stability to me and to other people? It could be a wall, it could be a fence, it could be a line of evergreen trees, or whatever it is, something that brings stability, something that possibly has a boundary element to it. So we feel tucked in, safe from the outside world. Paths leading to different mysterious corners here and there have been cited as being very relaxing. People can find their own place to go during the day. They can walk down a leafy little laneway and find a seat there, someplace just to sit and contemplate the world. Of course, wildlife in the garden is a huge source of entertainment and stillness for people. And the way we bring wildlife into our garden is by having obviously good plants in the garden. We bring in things that have flowers that are attractive to insects and butterflies. A lot of people love daffodils and tulips, but of course it's well known that they are not particularly interesting to bees and flies and butterflies. But a lot of summer flowers that we grow, and indeed autumn flowers and berries, have a great interest to biodiversity. They bring in so many creatures. Even trees now in May that are in flower, they are producing so much nectar for the bees. It's just wonderful to see the bees visiting all the trees. And later on, the berries are eaten by birds in the autumn time. So what we have in our garden is very important. But many people who are not gardeners don't really focus on the species of plants that come into the garden. They're much more attracted to the color or the shape or the form of plants. And I think a successful garden, particularly for an older person, is a garden that has very many points of interest for that person. Now, if you're a person that just loves pink and blue well then those colors should be incorporated in your garden as much as possible. Many men seem to prefer red and yellow in the garden. I've noticed that time and time again that they will go for that. They like the autumnal colors also, but so do everybody else also. So color is really important, and it has a very calming effect. And it's important to understand how color works for us when we're older, or maybe we have some sensory impairment. It can be very difficult for somebody living with the dementia to pick out an individual flower or an individual color if it's scattered through the garden. So mass planting is recommended. That's putting all the plants with one shape, form, or color together. So for example, if you have red geraniums in your garden, you put a big lot of them in together to make a real impact. Or if you have pink petunias, Surfina, hanging from hanging baskets, you maybe have them in some kind of a, an area under a roof or hanging from a pergola, somewhere where there will be real impact and a person can sit down and just drink in the color. So grouping colors and grouping similar things works very well for people who have, for example, visual impairment. Works really, really well. I've seen people who have macular degeneration really enjoying the garden when it's, put in a certain place at eye level, and they have plenty of time to move their head and to take it all in. Really, really, really good. It's fantastic. Also, leaf form is really important. We know that large leaves are beautiful for us to settle our eyes on and enjoy. And I'm thinking of New Zealand flax and phormium. I'm thinking of palm trees. I'm thinking of, agapanthus and things with strap-shaped leaves. They're wonderful. I'm also thinking of variegated shrubs like the spotted laurel, and shrubs that have a glossy finish to them, like the Portuguese laurel. Looks absolutely wonderful. Other plants have got a great sensory feel to them. I'm thinking of the conifers and how many of them, they're the evergreens, have a wonderful fruity smell. Some of them smell like pineapple, others like aniseed, others like lemon. I'm thinking about how wonderful they are to feel and to touch when one is going around the garden. Of course, the bedding plants that we buy during the summer have got a huge value to bring stillness and beauty into the garden. I'm thinking of the wonderful lobelias and campanulas. I'm thinking of creeping jenny and catmint, all those plants that you plant in pots and in window boxes, and they fall down over the edge of the windowsill and into people's hands. Those beautiful, beautiful scented leaves and flowers. I'm thinking of herbs. The wonderful benefit of having a little herb corner in your garden needs to be a sunny corner, of course, where you can have rosemary, which will grow into a shrub and have blue flowers in April. But you can also have mint and sage and thyme and chives and lavender and many, many other lemon balm, many other plants. Lemon verbena, indeed, a beautiful little shrub with lemon scented petals like lemon soap. Wonderful. So the sensory element and the colors in the garden are really, really fantastic to have. And of course, growing these plants is an additional wonder and delight. So this is May, and this is an ideal time to sow annual plants. Plants like Clarkia and night-scented stock and nasturtiums and all of these flowers. And many people will remember having grown these themselves years ago. Even the nasturtium is very, very popular for people. The seeds are large, it's easy to plant, and you can have them throughout late summer and into the autumn. Many people in the summer will grow plants that will be for next year, like honesty and wallflowers and rocket and all these biennials that come up the next year. In the flower garden, let us not forget some of the vegetables that produce beautiful flowers. In my own garden at the moment, I have cabbage and curly kale that have gone to seed, and the garden is full of yellow flowers. We have broom as well with yellow and polyanthus still in bloom. Now, the colors most suited for people who are living with the dementia have been cited as red, blue, and green. Of course, there's already green in the garden, so red and blue can be very effective, all the reds and all the blues. Have you ever been to a garden where one side, Helen Dillon used to have this, one side is all blue and purple and mauve and lavender, and the other side is all the hot colors, the reds, the oranges, the crimsons, you know, even down to the apricots. It's very effective to put all the hot colors together and the cool colors someplace else. Of course, in the flower garden, there's loads of places for grasses that move around in the wind. There's lots of places for bird feeding tables and for animals in the garden. Okay, now I just want to put this all in context. After the pandemic, many of us listening to this, many of our relatives, our friends, and our neighbors are feeling kind of exhausted, feeling drained. Many people are feeling boredom because many of the activities that they did 2 years ago are not running anymore. Many people who were working are not working in that job anymore, or their job is very reduced. So people are very, very challenged to find meaning in their day. And I believe that there is one way, better than anything, that can make this happen. And this is in keeping a record of one's daily activities. You know, as I said earlier, it's very good to have about 20 minutes in the outdoor in the garden. But if we keep a record of this for ourselves or our relatives or friends or our neighbors, if we regularly have a nature date, it really, really works. It really helps us to rehabilitate ourselves, which is, I think, what we're all trying to do at the moment, rehabilitating ourselves. Patience and care are needed. Patience and care. And some of us have to take small baby steps in getting the confidence back to get back out there. Many people don't even have the clothes or the shoes or the coats to get outdoor that they had before. And many people don't know where their garden tools are. You know, we need to realize that it takes a long time to get back to where we were. But the benefit of being out in the garden, in one's own house, or in a nursing home, or in a daycare center, wherever it is that this is the best way we can reconnect with others. We can share our story with other people, share our experiences, and encourage one another. Many people talk about overcoming difficulty in their life through hands-on activities in the outdoors. Michael McCarthy, the English novelist, has written Moth Snowstorm and many other books. And he describes how when he was very young, he suffered quite a big upset in that his mother died when he was very young. And his brother cried his eyes out, but he, the younger brother, didn't. He actually found himself in a neighbor's garden, and the shrub was full of butterflies. And he found himself focusing on that rather than what had happened to him. And down through his life, he wondered about that. He wondered about what it was that drew him to look at these butterflies and go and seek them day after day. and get great stillness and calm. This whole notion has been studied by psychologists, and it seems to be about drawing your attention to something. It's about consciousness, attentive, deliberate consciousness. So when my mother had her Alzheimer's, every day we would say, today, the plan for yesterday was we went to the park and we saw the daffodils. Today, the plan is we're going to feed the birds. You know, every day in the diary, we had a nature activity, and it brought a lot of fun and a lot of stillness and a lot of pleasure, really. When we get out and we reconnect with our younger selves, with our earlier selves, it's like taking the clothes out of the wardrobe from a couple of years ago. You know, we go, oh, look at that. I remember that. And we suddenly are connected. We suddenly are happy. We're celebrating. And we find different ways of celebrating. So if you're a child, you want a bouncy castle in the back garden. But if you're an older person, maybe you want to see summer clothes hanging on the line, blowing in the wind. Recently, we had a lovely activity where we got a man's shirt, a striped man's shirt, cut it into strips and made little bows to hang as bunting in the garden. Absolutely beautiful. So that's what I'm planning on doing. Last year during the pandemic, we made these wonderful wreaths out of just waste wool. They were just put on a piece of wire, made into balls and shoved through on a piece of wire. These colors represented what was in the garden at the time. There were two women who enjoyed making this from little bits of nylon, tied into little bows and just put together on a canvas picture frame. Again, an activity that started off as something to do and caused great excitement. These were like, we said they were like garden snails, all wound up, and they were put on a biscuit tin lid, capturing the colors in the garden. But let's remember Oliver Sacks and what he said about this. Oliver Sacks was a neurophysician who worked in America for many years. He was very successful in dealing with the brain and anything to do with the brain. And he said at the end of his days that he never knew anything that was more effective than gardening and music for the brain, for healing and improving cognitive ability, gardening and singing. So let's get to singing now and the flower garden. Over the last 2 years, I have been very, very lucky to have had access to a local nursing home where we started off in the morning with the dawn chorus, and we then had exercise to music. We then had nature study and flower arranging and all sorts of crafts. We had seashore and forest and riverside mammals and all sorts of projects. We had the dogs from some of the neighbors visiting. We looked and wrote down the birds that came into the garden, and our days were filled with the antics of the squirrels running about. And all of this activity, nature activity outdoors in the garden, was backed up by song. And I have actually made a list of the songs, the kind of songs and the kind of music that we used during that time. It was very effective, and I would like to share them with you. Many, many people enjoy Gilbert and Sullivan and light opera, particularly those who haven't been to the theatre for many, many years. We also looked at all the people who visited the Theatre Royal in Dublin. That's all on YouTube, and we played the music of many of those people, both Irish and foreign, who came to sing in that wonderful place in Dublin that existed up until 1961. Many of our residents got great fun from that. Also, The Four Seasons by Vivaldi is wonderful out in the garden, played on a Bluetooth speaker. When you hear Vivaldi's sounds of spring, oh my God, the birds jump out of their nests to come over and hear this wonderful music. And then in the summertime, you can have the water music, Handel's water music. And in the late afternoon or evening, Chopin, the nocturnes of Chopin. What is more wonderful than sitting out in the garden, listening to Chopin and sipping on a little drink and a little candle burning in a little container. Country ballads were great fun, and it got people singing together. Many older people remember the words of all the Irish songs, the country ballads, Christy Moore and the Dubliners, and the Clancy brothers, the Wheelia Wheelia Walia. Many people remember those songs and get great pleasure out of them. So sitting out in the garden at the end of the day, looking at the work that's been done, the deadheading and the planting and the raking, singing these songs brings great joy and happiness. Okay, don't forget humorous songs. We had great fun with Val Doonigan, or with The Jungle Book, The Bare Necessities of Life. We also had Burl Ives, who came from America, with so many songs, and Danny Kaye, so many of these. Many of the women were very interested in, and the men, Frank Sinatra, of course, and Dean Martin and Perry Como. We found that the musicals were terrific in the garden, particularly if you're having a party outdoors or, a birthday cake or celebration. For example, Midsummer's Day or Bealtaine now in May, or, whatever, Earth Day. If we're having a celebration, some of these are really fantastic. Nat King Cole, Christy Moore, Freddie White, all of these wonderful, wonderful songs. Okay, the benefit of being out in this wonderful environment, as I said earlier, is very deep and it's very mysterious. It's about raising our consciousness, I think. We become attuned to everything in the outdoors. We become alive. If you can compare people who spend an hour walking through a shopping center with those who walk through a park, they will not express the satisfaction or the calm at all of the people who have been outdoors. This direct awareness is magical. At this time of the year in May, if we're very aware, we could just spend our whole day noticing the changes that are happening outside. The leaves opening, and at the same time, the flowers on the trees. The trees are flowering. Green flowers, yellow flowers, sometimes we don't even notice them, but they are flowering, and they're producing a wonderful scent in the air, a sweet honey-like nectar-filled scent. By paying this attention and taking our time, or writing it down in like a nature journal, what can happen is that we become more curious about it. For example, the other day I was in the garden and I saw this window box, which is in a biodegradable window box, upside down. It's been there all during the winter time. Now, the winter was very mild, but I was very curious when I turned this over, what will be living underneath it? It was in the corner, in fact, inside of my glass house. What will be living under this? And to my absolute amazement, there were millipedes. A millipede is like a worm, but it's segmented. And there were maybe 40 or 50 millipedes, a whole colony of them living together. Oh, I hated disturbing them, absolutely hated it. But I noticed that what they had been doing was eating this window box. It was biodegradable, like turf. And there was all of this powder around them. No doubt it was some waste material, but maybe there were eggs there as well. So I needed to use that corner of the glass house. So I very carefully put the whole lot over in the compost, on the corner of the compost heap. And they were moving, they were very conscious of what was happening. They were glowing a bluey silver color. It was so wonderful to see them. You might say, what was the big deal? But we have millipedes and we have centipedes. And centipedes are the ones with the legs that run really fast if you turn a pot over. And they're kind of light amber in color. And those are meat eaters. They attack other insects and eat them. But the millipede is a vegetarian and is slow moving. And I know I've seen on nature programs that millipedes can be as large as, they can be so large, like a bath towel that's wrapped up. They can be really, really large. And there they are in the forest floor in many parts of the world, eating the recycling the vegetation. So my little encounter with the millipedes was wonderful. It just opened up curiosity. And I think that happens. I've seen that happen with older people. They say, oh, look at that. Look at the poor bumblebee struggling along the grass. Maybe we should give him a flower or some sugar or something. I see older people noticing the wonderful creatures in the garden, the slugs and the snails and the worms, and the respect that they have for life. I think that's really what's happening in the garden, is we are in a way seeing our lives mirrored by the lives of others, be they birds or creatures. When we're in the garden, we're taught to slow down, to take our time, because nature's time is very slow. It's constant, but it's slow. So if you ever noticed how long it takes a bud to open and turn into a flower, if you're paying attention, it takes a long time and it slows us down. It's really important for us to stop and to notice things. We get curious and we start to ask ourselves questions like, where did I see this before? Or is this creature trying to tell me something? So if a bird is going in and out of a hedge, the bird is very likely saying, this is where my nest is. Please don't disturb me here. Or if a fox passes us, as very often happens in Dublin, in an urban area, we know that fox needs food, needs to be able to get access in and out of gardens and fields. When we look at mountains, we're filled with marvel. When we look at large trees, we get wonderful stability. Wonderful stability. We know that trees give off phytocyans, which are chemicals that are very good for us. We know that the pine tree, in particular, it's been studied in great detail. We know the pine trees are all communicating with one another. That's just lovely to know that pine trees will look after a young pine tree and send it food. We know that. We know that all of the trees and all of the shrubs produce more sugar than they need, and they leave it in the soil. It's like they're generous. They don't use it all up. There's a lesson there for us to be sparing, to be careful. And in our gardens, to remember sustainability. I went to a wonderful talk last weekend by a girl called Aoife Moon here in Dublin, and she was just talking about how wonderful a feeling it is to be sustainable in the garden. And I agree with her, how it just feels good to recycle things, to use the plastic tray you get in the supermarket time and time again, to not easily create waste. In our sustainability, we know that we're here for but a short time. And so we don't put chemicals into the soil. We try to leave the place the way we found it. We're very caring with our little birds. There's a robin just outside the window as I speak to you now. Some robins live for only 3 years or 4 years, but they're capable of living much longer if they have food and protection and shelter. Sometimes when we look into our flower garden, we get a lot of really interesting feelings. We feel the fragility of the petal of the flower. And if we look into the flower, we'll be filled with wonder at what the insect sees. The flower looks so different from inside, with the light growing through it. If we wait long enough to see after the flower has been pollinated, the formation of the seed, the swelling of the flower, and the production of fruit, it's so interesting. It's so exciting. Some flowers, when they die and they die back, I should say, can be just very interesting. You take lavender, for example. You can cut the lavender and bring it into the house, and you can look at the dehisced buds of some things for a long, long time. You can draw them. You can trace them. You can do rubbings on bark, see the strength of the bark and the texture of it. Now, two people, Kaplan and Kaplan, husband and wife, did a lot of research in the late 80s about something called attention restoration, as well as many other things they studied. But this attention restoration is very interesting because many of us get jaded with life. We get just ground off. You know, you hear people say, I'm fed up. You know, I'm fed up. When I hear that, I think, take that person out into the garden, take them to the botanical gardens, take them by a river, because it has been proven that focusing our attention on something that is moving and vibrant and colorful and unpredictable restores our attention capacity. So people who are staring at screens for too long, they need to, every 20 minutes, look 20 meters away for 20 seconds to relax their eyes. We understand attention restoration is really, really important for people who want to find themselves again after the pandemic. Richard Louv in America is one of my favorite people. He talks about the great importance in being positive about the future of our planet. How important it is that we stop telling our children bad stories about the environment and global warming and climate and, the destruction of biodiversity. And I think he's really, really got a point. He said they won't feel that they can do anything positive. So we need to do everything we possibly can to let people understand that there is hope in every tree that we plant, in every flower that we plant in our garden. There's great hope. There's great potential that the earth can heal itself if we get out of the way and give it a chance. Richard Louv talks about the great things that are happening in America, where there's multi-generational sharing of the outdoors, beaches and forests and woodlands and flower gardens, where many generations are sharing both their knowledge, their skills, and their manpower to improve things across the board. If we're going to flourish after the pandemic, I think we all need to put our heads together. We need to get out there and we need to inform ourselves with the latest and what is really working in gardens today. And for the next few minutes, I want to focus on that, if you don't mind, as I think it's really, really necessary. The idea of going to a garden center and buying everything you need for the garden is a great idea. It's a wonderful idea if you're a millionaire. You can go and buy everything and put, and this is what a lot of people do nowadays. They spend an enormous amount of money creating an outdoor like their indoor, which has everything perfect and in its place. But I think there's a better way to do the garden than that, and a more feasible, economical, and sustainable way. I think if you look at your garden, or the garden in your nursing home or your daycare center or wherever you happen to be, you first of all look at what is. The same as we look at ourselves, what is, where are we? Where are we finding ourselves? Are you happy today? Are you stressed? Are you looking forward to anything? And that sort of thing. You go with a full knowledge of what you need. And you go into the garden and you look at the garden and say, is this garden meeting the needs of the people here? So you look for obvious things, such as a place to sit. Is it comfortable? Is it sunny? Does it provide shade? Could I have flowers growing here? What kind of flowers could I have growing here? There's a wonderful book here by Roy Lancaster, and it's called Perfect Plant, Perfect Place. And it's a great book, absolutely, because all of us have areas in our garden that are too shady or too damp or too dry. And this is an absolutely great, great book. You can probably find lots of information online also about, yes, I have a damp, shady area and I want a plant that's going to be lovely, many months of the year, that type of thing. That's a great book. Another great book is The Garden Awakening with, what's her name, Mary Reynolds, who won the gold at Chelsea a few years ago. Garden Awakening. It's a really, really good book because she talks about the magic of what it is to be a custodian of the earth, to be a person in charge. You can be a creative spirit where your work is deeply anchored to the benefits of the soil, the organisms that live in the soil, and that you plant plants that are good for biodiversity and they bring pleasure and all the rest. She's a great and very inspiring person. But you can also dip into these kind of books, the Collins and any of these garden birds, and get great information on where is the best place to put bird feeders, for example, in the garden, and what to put in them and the like. Garden is a 12-month activity, of course, and I have found I've been doing some work in some local places, trying to have gardens that are very interesting all year round. Years ago, I used to work in schools, and there was a great problem, and it was that the children went away in June, of course, or even at the end of May, and the garden was abandoned for many months, and nobody was there to care for it, water it, or enjoy it. But this is not the case, of course, in nursing homes or in private homes around the country. So I would say that on the 12-month calendar, we would have activities each month that would provide the maximum opportunity for flowers in our flower garden, or whatever you want, your vegetables, your herbs, all year round. And that would start with feeding the soil. So feeding the soil is all about bringing in organic materials. Now that can be cut grass from your green. It can be farmyard manure. It can be things from your kitchen, but not foodstuffs, obviously. Bringing in organic material of any kind, even bark mulch, whatever it is, into your garden and incorporating it in the soil. Having a compost heap, of course, is a great way to do that. Layering in green and brown and green and brown. Not using chemicals in your garden, of course, works really, really well. Then the next thing is to say, if I would like a tree in the garden or a large plant with, for example, a phormium or New Zealand flax or one of these, where would I put it? A very popular plant at this time of the year are the artichokes and the cordons, which you buy in garden centers for €4 or €5, and they grow to be 10 feet tall, gray plants, wonderful plants and focal points for the next 6 months. They're absolutely fabulous. They produce these wonderful flowers that are mauvey blue color. But some people are really hung up and they want to have roses, climbing roses or standard roses or whatever. Now, I must say to you, remember with roses, you have the thorns. They have to be considered, you know. Roses are lovely, but the thorns, not so lovely. So if you have roses in the garden, maybe keep to the back wall and have them espaliered against the wall, you know, grown flat and wired in. So you have the benefit of the roses and say, for example, clematis, beautiful combination on your wall or your fence. You can have archways with jasmine. Jasmine is beautiful because it's night scented. And so in the evenings, it wafts into the house. Even one little piece of jasmine, summer jasmine, now the white one, is so, so lovely. The winter one is yellow and it comes out in November. It's also a great one to plant since there's very little else flowering in the winter time. So you look at your color wheel and you say, what are my colors? What are my favorite colors? What are my favorite plants? And or my mother's favorite plants, or whoever you're doing the garden for, and you choose from a huge selection of plants. So plants can be sown from February or March onwards, but they need to be indoor in the house or in a glass house. They need to get 15 degrees to germinate. But after they germinate, they can be put out under some kind of cover and just to keep the frost off them. Once they germinate, they don't need heat anymore. They just need protection against frost. And now we're in the month of May and we're hoping that there won't be frost, but we can never be sure up until the first week in June about frost. So we have to be vigilant and go out and cover our plants and our flowers if there's any possibility of frost coming. At the moment, I have a lot of flowers in the garden, which are all green, of course, at the moment. I have poppies and snapdragons and French marigolds and all sorts of things like that, alyssum for during the summer, and campanula. And then I have lots of things for the autumn. But what I must do, and what we all must do, is give each plant a little bit of space. So it's a mistake to sow too many. You're better to have 25 seeds that you can then gently separate and put into separate pots and let them all grow on. And then you place them in the garden. They'll be full of flowers because they'll have a good root system. That's really important. Then putting out a whole lot of things. Also, just broadcasting seeds on the surface doesn't work. In my experience, and a lot of other people will say, apart from carrots and root vegetables, don't broadcast your seed. Obviously, with wildflower seeds, you can, but you do lose a lot at the same time. It's actually more economical to sow them on a tray and then plant out clumps into your garden. So looking after the soil, you add your organic material, and of course you make sure that the soil is not trodden on. That's very important. So if you need to walk over and back across a certain area, you can lay down some tiles or some wood or whatever. The use of cardboard in the garden is something everybody is talking about these days, this wonderful use of cardboard. And it is great because it seals out the light from the weeds germinating. So if we cover an area of lawn or weedy area in the garden with cardboard and water it well, all we have to do then is add compost to the top, either bought compost or landfill compost or our own homemade compost and sow our plants directly into that. Care must be taken that the cardboard does not have staples in it or sellotape. You must remove anything like that and put the cardboard down overlapping so that there's no light at all getting in to encourage weeds to work their way through. Also, we have to wet the cardboard very, very much with the hose, and care must be taken not to walk on that because it's very slippy while the cardboard is wet. So as soon as possible, get your compost on top of it and start planting. Even though the cardboard hasn't yet melted, if you like, into the soil, it will be incorporated very, very quickly because the worms and the other creatures will come up. They'll be delighted to see this food source and they'll get to work straight away. That's great. So when we plant our flowers and our shrubs, all you have to consider is the height. So if you're doing a spring garden, you have at the front the snowdrops, the polyanthus, the grape hyacinths, you have your daffodils, your tulips, maybe other daffodils and tulips, and Brompton stock. You go and you have all of these in height order so that you will see them, like an amphitheater of color. Be fantastic. In the summer, don't forget that we love things that flower for a long, long time. So you get begonias in a bulb, a summer bulb now in May, and you put them in the pot and you will have continuous flowering for about 3 months. Absolutely glorious. In fact, my begonias I put away in the glass house last October and they have flowered all winter and they're still flowering. I've just brought them out. But of course, frost will kill them in 1 minute. So you must be careful with begonias. Dahlias give wonderful late summer flowers, daisies, if you like dahlias. Everybody's buying dahlias. And salvia is one of the most interesting plants. Years ago, we didn't really have an awful lot of them. We had sage in the herb garden, but we didn't. But now we have salvia of many, many hundreds of colors, and they are so wonderful. They have aromatic leaves. The flowers are every shade of purple down to pale pink, and they look absolutely magnificent. There are many different heights. They're wonderful. So salvia are a great addition to the flower garden. Don't forget sweet pea and nasturtium, snapdragons. Many older people like the flowers that they grew up with. So we always have cornflowers and we have sunflowers, of course, particularly this year in Ireland, we're all growing sunflowers to support Ukraine. Those beautiful, beautiful sunflowers that need staking and need to be in the soil. They need a lot of feeding, but they produce the most glorious flower heads and seeds indeed. Don't forget to deadhead and to come back and to collect seeds and dry them and keep them for next year. Many, many flowers can be dried in bunches that can be put hanging up, and during the autumn they can be wonderful in the dried flower arrangements. I'm thinking of artichokes, and I'm thinking of so many flowers that dry well and look beautiful with the evergreens during October and November and December in the flower garden. So that's it. Don't use chemicals and make sure that you conserve water. Water is very, very valuable commodity. So I think that just to summarize, I think that being in the flower garden can give us a great feeling of being alive. It can be good for our flexibility, good for our mental health, and certainly it can allow us to rehabilitate ourselves after the pandemic and those we love. Later today, I'm going to be in 2 different gardens sharing these lovely flowers young flowers with older people, and allowing them to decide where they're going to plant them, and maybe putting a little pepper around them to keep the squirrels at bay, and keep an eye on the slugs, of course, and snails. But the joy that they will bring will be worth it.